This is an amazing group. I missed the first couple of speakers, but everybody after that, I was just like, wow, so relatable. I mean, it's yes, the answer is yes. I felt that. I've done that. I remember that. So it's just you've got a great group of friends here. And like you say, you are who you hang around. So you've got great people here who have overcome, it sounds like, right? And we make a decision to overcome one day based on our challenges. And then here we are, learning, sharing, always growing. So thanks everybody for your stories. Yeah, real quick, the TAG Talks. TAG stands for Transparency, Acceptance, and Growth. That's also a book series that I've created. People who come and speak at my events. I also put them in the book as co-authors. So once you leave the event, you have an amazing story out there on video on my channels and my social media, and then you're also an author. So it's just a fun, and it's based on just that transparency, acceptance, and growth. It's based on people overcoming challenges in their life. And like all of you here, I'm sure, who are passionate about helping people not go through what you've been through, right? That's where our passions come from. We don't want anybody to suffer like we did. Lately in the last couple of years, I've been calling myself the water boy. And people go, why do you call yourself the water boy? And two things. One, I'm not really interested in the title, but the other is because I tell people, I saw this quote a few years ago that says, I've been through the fires of hell and now I carry buckets of water for you. So yeah, when people say, what do? I go, I'm the water boy. And then I get to tell them why I'm the water boy, right? So it's just kind of fun. Let me go back a little bit now, and I'll tell you, and I'll share my story. Very similar and alike to stuff I'm hearing here. Childhood trauma. That's what I'm passionate about, is overcoming, understanding childhood trauma. The subtitle of my book, Heal the Boy and the Man Will Appear, is the importance of understanding and expressing your emotions. Right. A couple of people touched on emotions at a very young age. If we don't learn how to express our emotions, that can cause us a lot of challenge, especially if we live through some trauma in our lives. And you know what? I don't know if there's any of us who have avoided the trauma. A lot of times when I'm on stage, I'll ask the audience, I'll say, has anybody here experienced rough times in their life? And everybody will raise their hand. And if somebody does, and jokingly I say, is there anybody here who's had a perfect life? Because if you have, stand up, we're all going to beat you up right now. And everybody has to raise their hand because we've all had challenges in our life. And regardless of where we've come from, right? Single parent, just mom, just dad, two parents, whatever the environment is, there are things that happen in our lives, because the adults in our life, the people while we're growing up, only know what they've been taught. And unfortunately, at least in my generation, and a lot of the people that I work with have not been taught how to express and understand their emotions, right? Our emotions are an energy. I'll tell this to people all the time: emotions, energy in motion. I actually learned that from Tony Robbins, Jennifer. Emotions are an energy, emotions. And they have to be released, right? And if we hold those emotions in, we can get sick. We're literally triggering different hormones based on the emotion that we're feeling, and we can physically get sick from it. Example, if you're watching your favorite sports team or whatever you enjoy watching, and they score, you don't just sit there and go, oh, that was great. You go, yeah, you're excited. You jump up and down. And a lot of times, most of the time, you can't control that, right? It's an energy, it's an emotion. Sadly, our negative emotions, or someone makes us angry or does something to us, we hold it in. We just go, oh man, we hold it in. And that's what starts to create a negative energy within us that helps us to get sick. It creates weird hormones and things triggering in our bodies. And at some point, that emotion has to come out. And what happens is it comes out as outbursts, right? Going back for me, I learned all this after years and years of putting myself, I learned through pain and suffering and all these different challenges in my life, because I didn't understand how to express my emotions. And I'll tell you, in kind of brief bullet points, the beginning of my life, I was born and raised in San Jose, California. That's Northern California, for those of you who are outside of California. And San Jose was a small town when I was born and when I was growing up. And I lived with my mother, my father. My mother came to the marriage with a son and a daughter. My father came to the marriage with the daughter, and then together they had me. I was the youngest. We had a very loving family. My father was back from Vietnam. They were both hippies after that era, and love and peace, and we just had a great time. I thought, right? I was a little boy at about the age of 7. growing up very close to my father, I tell people all the time, like the earth needs the sun to survive, I needed my father. We were one. Went everywhere he went, did everything he did, play with him all day, every day. Um, uh, Very close to him. And I'll make this point for later, that in those first 7 years of my life, he taught me love. He taught me how to love and what it was. I get emotional anytime I talk about this. At the age of 7, though, my mother comes home one day and she says, "Son, get in the car. We're going to go for a ride." In San Jose, small town at the time, our family, Hispanic family, large, lived all within a 5-mile radius of our home. We all lived in that area. Aunts, uncles on both sides, grandmas, grandpas, everybody lived around us. So it wasn't uncommon to jump in the car with my mom and go for a ride. And so I'm in the garage playing with my father. My mom drives up. She says, "Jump in the car." I get in, and she puts us on an airplane to Alaska. I'm 7 years old, and I'm like, up airplane, fun. I get to Alaska. We're playing games or feeding us on the airplane. We get to Alaska, fun, snow. And then the next morning, I realized, where's my dad? All the excitement's gone. And I go, "Hey, where's my dad?" And she just looks at me and she says, "Don't worry about your dad. You're not going to see him again." And it broke me. It literally broke me. And I didn't understand emotions. I didn't know what an emotion was. I didn't know how I felt. Looking back, I was confused. I was hurt. I was angry. There's just a million emotions going through this 7-year-old body of that didn't know how to express them. So I'm not just holding them in. I don't know what is happening. I'm just being shifted internally. And over the next few months, I became broken, and I would cry at school every day. I wouldn't do any schoolwork. I'd sit there and stare at my desk. It wasn't purposeful. It was just I was gone. I was in this cloud, this fog that I lived many, many years in. And I remembered like teachers calling my mom and going, "Hey, there's something wrong with your son here. I don't know what's going on. He doesn't even hear me when I talk to him, and kids are starting to make fun of him because he cries all the time." And my mom started to kind of keep me home because I would always have these breakdowns, uncontrollable. And there were times she had to go to work, obviously, and she would drive me to school. She'd say, "You have to go. You have to get off the car. You have to go to school." And it was like a gauntlet. There was this big long chain link fence, and you'd have to walk through the fence through the playground to get to the building where our class was. And whenever I'd walk through that gate crying, and we were in Alaska, it was snowing, it was cold. So, all bundled up, and I'd have those ski masks on where you can barely just see your eyes and your mouth. And it was like my way of hiding also. And I'd walk through that gate, and the kids would instantly start pointing at me, crying, laughing at me, and just making fun of me. And after months of that, I remember the day that I just walked through that fence and my face just dried instantly. And I looked at these kids and I said to myself, "I'm never going to cry again. And nobody will ever laugh at me again." And from that age of 7, if it was, I was lost. I shifted. My heart hardened. I learned that as an older age, that my heart had hardened. And, if you looked at me for more than 2 seconds, I assumed you were going to laugh at me. I assumed that you were going to make fun of me, and I would fight you. I would attack you in rage. We ended up coming back from Alaska, and I was able to see my father. Now, the double hit here was that when I got to see him, I learned very quickly that my mother left him for good reason. I just didn't see. He was home. I mentioned I played with him every day, all day. He didn't work. He used to roll these funny cigarettes that I didn't know what they were. And he'd sit around and he'd do drugs, and he'd sell drugs all day, every day. And, my mom started telling me stories about why and what was going on, because she knew I was broken. She saw what happened, but she did the best she could. She was just trying to protect us, right? I love my mom to death. She's the number one in my life. And, so when I got to see him, and then he didn't come around, I learned this at an older age, but what I had done is I associated love to pain. I loved my father to death. I was separated from him. Pain, terrible pain, horrible, confusing pain. I got to see my father again, and I was so excited, and I cried, and we held each other, and then he disappeared. He took off. Love is pain. I would do anything that I could to spend time with my father. Another lesson that I learned over time, the people in our lives who we allow to treat us badly, we have to look back and go, why do we allow people to treat us badly? And what happened for me is I had to go back again to that age and go, who did I love and miss the most? Because we love who's not in our lives. I love my mother, of course I do, but I missed my father, so I wanted my father. But whenever I'd go around him, he would be drunk. He'd leave me outside of bars at the age of 8, 9 years old. He'd leave me outside of bars in San Francisco until 2:30 in the morning. I'd be sitting out there. He'd come out fighting in rage. I mean, just crazy stuff. And I learned that I had to be around my father, who I loved. I had to accept his bad behavior toward me. So what happened was that is these associations that we don't even think about as we go throughout our lives. If we see somebody we like or love and want to be around, we allow them to treat us badly. And without even understanding it, without even knowing it. Why do people treat you bad? Do people treat you badly? Do you allow it? Why? There's an answer to the question, right? So you wrote on there, why do people do what they do? Or I think you said, Jennifer, those were over my lifespan. Those were some of the my battles of the lifespan. Those are the 3 questions I had for myself. Why do I do what I do? Why do I act the way that I act? And most importantly, why do I feel the way that I feel? I had those questions for me. I wanted to know, because going back again, by the time I was 9, we came back. And by the time I was 9, I was on drugs. By the time I was 13, I conceived my first child. I was in the 7th grade, I think maybe the 8th grade, I conceived my first child. By the time I was 14, I got incarcerated. And just because of this fog that I lived in, and I continued to live in for many years. Now, at that young age, after getting incarcerated, sadly, the environment that I was in, you were cool now, right? I got a nickname, Rallo. He's cool. He's crazy. He'll do anything. He's always in jail, blah, 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 blah. And I took that on as something because I was so hurt. I was so broken. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what was going on. Something shifted in me. And so after that first incarceration at the age of 14, I would spend the majority of the next 10 years incarcerated. And I basically got out of San Quentin prison when I was 24 years old. And during those times, those years when I asked myself those questions, I would go do things that I knew internally. I know now it was God, the Holy Spirit was telling me, don't go do that, man. But I'd go. And then I'd go, why? Why did I do that? Here I am again. Why do I act the way that I act, right? I had this mask. Somebody talked about a mask. I had this mask and I thought I was this and I thought I was that. And I, this cool guy and all these things. But internally, I didn't know who I was. I was broken. And then why do I feel the way that I feel? So many of us with depressions and anxieties and PTSDs and all these things, we don't know why we feel the way we feel. And somebody said something earlier, I was listening about people would ask, why do you feel the way, why'd you do that? Or, what's going on? And I don't know. And sometimes I feel so bad. Some of the kids I work with, I do a lot of work with kids in juvenile hall. They ask them, why'd you do that? I don't know. Yes, you do. Why'd you do? I don't know. Yes, you do. And I just think he doesn't or she doesn't, because I didn't. I had no idea why I was doing the things that I was doing. I know now. I could look back. I understand it. I've been through the psychologies and the neurosciences and all these different trainings, so I understand. But when you're in it, you don't know. I don't know why I just did that, right? I wish I didn't, but I don't know why I did. Well, you know better than that. You knew that's illegal. Yeah, I did, but I don't know why I did. So I went on this journey when I got out of prison, and I was trying to get those 3 questions answered. And fortunately for me, a blessing, I figured out that I had to move out of the area that I lived in because all my friends would not let me out of what I'd been into over the last 10 years, right? And so I went to my parole officer. Those of you who have been incarcerated might know this. Those of you who haven't, if you've been to state prison, when you parole, you got to parole to the county that you committed your crimes in. And then you can't leave the county for the most part. But I wanted to get out of there. I knew, and I went to my parole officer and I said, man, I won't make it. I'll be right back there like I've been the last 10 years if I don't move, right? And he said, well, you can go. And I told him where I wanted to go. My mother had bought a house way up north in Sonoma County, in a little town called Cloverdale. And she had a side unit on her house. And I said, I want to move to this county. And they said, well, we'll let you, but you got to go ask them permission. They don't just take anybody. If you've had certain crimes, whatever it is, they may not take you. So they set an appointment. I went and I talked to the parole officer there, and he, gave me all these rules and everything. I said, yeah, sure. And he said, he goes, last thing, if you want to come to live in my county, you got to go to college. By that time, I was 25 years old. I didn't even finish high school, and I'm like, college. And he's like, you got to go to college. And I said, okay. I just said, okay. And he goes, no, you don't understand. The day you move into this, the first night you sleep in this town, you already got to be enrolled in college. And I said, all right. At the time, I was like, this jerk, now I look back and I say, what a blessing, and I said, okay, So I went, and I didn't know, like I said, I didn't even graduate high school. I went to the local Santa Rosa Junior College, and I'm asking, what do I do? How do I sign up for a class? Where do I go? Blah, blah, blah. They send me to administration. I tell them I need to sign up for a class. They say, oh, you got to do an assessment. So I do an assessment. And they just look at me like, you're not ready for college classes, which I think I knew. You're not ready, And I said, well, what do? I want to move into this county, man. I need to take a class here. And they said, we have this little unit on the side, this little trailer, and they'll help you get to high school equivalency or GED. And then from there, you could take college classes. And I said, well, that's say the junior college. And they said, yes, it's ran by the junior college. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I went and I got the paperwork and I signed up, and I took it to the parole officer and I said, here, look, this is going to work. And he says, yeah, you can move into my county. So, through battles over the next few years, I stayed in school. I was definitely institutionalized at the time. That was the culture that I lived in those years that I was incarcerated. Because of how lost in the fog that I was in, I belonged there. I wasn't there for no reason. And I had to kind of try to assimilate out of that lifestyle, right? And it wasn't easy. The good thing was that I moved and I was spending time in college where, most people in college aren't coming from that life. But I do remember after took me about a year and a half, 2 years to get to the high school equivalency. And then they said, hey, you can take college courses now. What do you want to take? And I said, I don't know. I said, I have no idea. What do I take? You tell me. And they said, well, you can either get a program to go transfer and get a bachelor's degree, or you can do general ed and get an AA. I mean, you can do whatever you want. And I just said, just give me GE. And I started my general education college classes, and I had my first ever psychology course, Psychology 101, and it changed my life. I took this class. The professor was a Native American woman who practiced her native spirituality, and she taught psychology. Can you imagine the combination of those two things in studying? I mean, it completely changed my life. And the key point was, I'm reading this big, thick Psychology 101 book, and it answered the three questions that I'd been asking myself that I'd never spoken out loud. Why do I do what I do? Why do I act the way that I act? And why do I feel the way that I feel? If you grew up like this, you may act like this. If this happened to you, you may feel like this. And it just answered the questions. And I was like, oh my God, there are actually reasons. And so what I had done is I got so intrigued, I got off of my GE track on any track, and I started studying psychology and neuroscience and just communications, anything that helped me understand me here inside, internally, spiritual stuff, just anything that I could. Writing, I was creative writing, just anything that was creative and helped me understand me. And so after understanding and learning some of these things, the first thing I did, like I'd mentioned, for many, many years, I went to juvenile hall. I said, I got to teach these kids this stuff that I've learned, because if I had known these things back then, I wouldn't have gone through all of that. And so I started working with kids back then. And then I started seeking more on the spiritual side of things. I understood the science of the mind. I understood the science of the body, biology, right? There's psychology, there's a biology to us. And I understood why, those three questions, those three whys, but I wasn't healed, right? There was no healing, because I didn't know the childhood trauma. I didn't know, I didn't figure these things out yet or heal from them. And actually, one of my core speeches now is, with God as the foundation, understanding the science of the mind and the body will change your life. Because for me, it took all three of those to really change. So I had gone to college. I went off of my tracks. I wanted to study with the best psychologists that I can find. But I didn't have the path to go to any university that I wanted to, but I wanted to study. I heard that there were great psychology program at Stanford University. So I was trying to see what I got to do to come and go study at Stanford psychology. And I found that they had continuing study courses. And if you had a certain amount of units, you could take those units and it'll qualify you to go to Stanford. You just got to pay for the classes out of your pocket. And so I was like, I'm going to do it because I want to learn from the best. So I started taking psychology courses at Stanford, and I was just learning all these things that I thought were so important about teaching. I mean, including at Stanford, there was a psychology course on happiness. At Stanford, there's psychology courses on understanding your emotions. I mean, there's all these things that I never even knew existed. Going forward, I started helping people. I started working with people at the juvenile hall. I ended up working with their parents, seeing just these different patterns of people, understanding people, because it had been something that I lived through, right? Something that I survived. But I want to tell you, and I'll finish up right now. I don't know how long I've been going, but the spiritual side of things was a major transformation for me. I started going to church, right? I had a calling. I just started going to church. And I even remember while I was in school, and I really wasn't going to church or studying Bible or anything like that. I do remember having this call, this pull. And sometimes I would just like walk around for hours, just kind of lost, trying to figure things out. And I would just go to a church and I'd just sit there. I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm here. I'd be sitting in the church by myself and I'd sit there and for an hour, 2 hours sometimes, and I just leave. Nothing. I wouldn't get, I wouldn't get nothing. I just go sit there, leave, come back. And every once in a while, I just go to the church. And then I met a pastor. I found a good church and I met a pastor, Pastor Francis Anfuso. For the last 21 years, he's been my pastor. He retired a few years ago, and now I pay him as my coach, my spiritual coach. But I remember him seeing me and seeing how broken and misunderstood that I was. And he could see on me things that I think other people didn't see. It was God-given that I met this man. And he would come to me and he would hug me. And that wasn't who I am. I'm just like, I'm like, I want a man hugging me type thing, right? He'd be hugging me and he would feel me pulling back and he would just hold on to me. And he would say, I love you. And I had associated love to pain. So I didn't want his love because I liked him, right? I liked him. I was learning from him. And if he loved me, then I would have to accept him treating me badly at some point. If he loved me, he'd hurt me because love was pain, an association that I didn't even know that I had. But I stuck it out and he said, just keep coming, Raul, just keep coming. And he taught me to quiet my mind. He said, quiet your mind and just soak in prayer. When you quiet your mind, you're going to hear from God. So it took me actually a year and a half, almost 2 years to even understand that I had control of my mind. I can choose what I think. Things will pop in, but I could pop them right back out. Where most of the time, for many, many years, my mind would do this and it was all negative and I just would go crazy, just never stop. And I learned to quiet my mind. I learned to hear from God. And I was able to understand things more and more. During a meditation, during soaking in prayer, during a quiet time in my head, God pulled me from my body and he took me into a field that there had been a brick wall in front of for many, many years. And I had seen psychologists, I'd seen therapists. I'd been through the whole gauntlet, really trying to just learn and understand me. And I would always say, I have this wall and there's a block. I don't know what it is. When I feel like I want to be happy, when I feel like I want to get a new job, when I feel like I want to grow in life, there's this wall and I just can't get past that. I don't know what it is. And the psychologist, Chloe Madonis, you might know her, Jennifer, Chloe Madonis, I got to work with her, and she was like, well, can you imagine a ladder on this wall and go over it? And I said, I can see the ladder, but I can't go over it. Can you picture a door and walk through the door? And I said, I see a door, but there's no key. I can't open the door. And so I went through all the processes, but one day, and she asked me, what's on the other side of the wall? And I said, I sense freedom and I see this beautiful field and I sense freedom over there. I don't know why, I don't know what, I just see freedom. That's what would come to me, freedom. And so this day that God pulls me and he puts me in this field and I'm standing there and the entire wall is gone. And I just see this beautiful field, miles, trees way out, beautiful colors in the sky. And I'm standing, the wall's gone. And I go, oh, the wall is gone. But I couldn't move. And I'm just like, what's going on? I can't move. And I look over and there's a little boy standing there. And I instantly realized that it's me when I was 7 years old, when this all started. And I looked at him and the first instinct was anger. I looked at him And I said, you're the wall. You're holding me here for all of these years. You're holding me here. And this little boy just looked at me. And he said, no, I'm not holding you here. You're holding me here. And when he said that, I had this just energy from above of understanding that when that boy broke, when his heart hardened, that I shifted, I created an alter ego. And that alter ego protected that little boy for all of those years, 35, 40 years, protected this child from pain, from the emotions he didn't know how to understand, from the confusion that he was having. But all the times that I saw this wall and I sensed the freedom, it was that little boy saying, let me go. Let's live. Let's survive. Heal the boy and the man will appear. So I knelt down and I just started to hug him. And I'm sorry, I'm going long. I'm going to try and finish this up really quickly. And I started to hug him and I just started pouring these words coming out. I didn't even think of them. They were just coming. I said, I love you. Your happiness, your joy, your light. I love you. Your happiness, your joy, your light. I'm sorry. I love you. And then I started to call him son. I love you, son. I'm sorry, son. You are the light. You are the joy. You are my love. You are my son. And I was thinking at the same time, this is not my son. This is me. My father passed at a very young age. He was 47, many years before this experience. And what I realized is as I was holding him, telling him that I loved him, when I started to say son, it was my father now holding me. And he was telling me, I love you, son. I'm sorry, son. And it was me holding me as a child. It was my father holding us. And then it shifted. And all three of us stood up. And it was coming from above. You are the light. You are the joy. I love you. You are my son. And I understood that all of this life, all of this horror, all this pain, all of this confusion, I had created and put myself through it by creating this alter ego because I didn't understand how to express my emotions. I didn't know how I felt. And I also realized right there and then, a message was that this life didn't happen to you. It happened for you. And now you're going to go share what I've taught you. From day one experience to prison, to incarceration, to streets, to college, to studying at Stanford University, you're going to go share this message and you're going to change people's lives. And the boy was healed and the man appeared. And the last thing that happened is somehow, some way, the little boy appeared in my hand and I just looked at him and I was prompted to put him into my heart. And that day I told you my heart hardened, it finally softened. My life changed. That little boy stood in front of me and he started to walk into the field and he said, and he didn't say anything, he started to walk in the field, but he stopped and he turned around and he looked at me and I thought, he's hesitating. Why are you hesitating? And then again, it was me. And I thought, no, I'm hesitating. Go, we're free, you're free. And he walked in that field and he disappeared. And from that day, I knew what my mission was. And from that day, I started working towards everything that I do now, writing my books, my Tag Talks platform. And I'll tell you the stories that I've heard here. I invite you all to go to Tag Talks Live and apply to speak. We have 3 events coming up. Share your story, share your message, get it out there, because our wisdom, what I've learned is our wisdom, our life experience is not common knowledge. People need to hear what you have. People need to hear your life experience. So Andres, I think that was long. I apologize. I get passionate about this. I love to help people. I love to inspire people to share their story. Thanks so much. Again, the stories that I heard here are amazing. If I missed your story, I still want to hear it. Go to Tag Talks Live, apply. Everybody that gets on this stage and is strong and powerful and gets up here and is bold and is transparent has made a decision. And the decision is to change their life. And the decision is to daily practice and change their life. And that's what Tag Talks is all about. You know, we connect the dots by looking back. We can't look forward and go, what happens next? What happens next? We look back and we go, oh, I understand that now. So what has happened to us is very important in our lives. And right there, I knew that the life didn't happen to me. It happened for me. And I wouldn't have gained the wisdom that I had. I wouldn't have studied the psychology that I did. I wouldn't have gone so deep and learned all these things if that life hadn't happened for me. And that's why we're here. That's what Tag Talks is all about.